Anthony Gibbons formed Resolve, a company providing appraisal, consultant, and mediation services. Anthony is also one of the longtime members of the Runstad Advisory Board. Good morning, Anthony. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Hi, nice to see you.
Well, starting off, can you explain a little bit more about your background and how you connected with the Runstad Department of Real Estate?
Probably my first connection with it was through Bob Philly, who I always felt was one of the fathers of the program. That was my term. But back when I was president of our local appraisal chapter, and Bob was raising funds for the creation of a department where he was trying to bring together people from different sectors of the industry, basically trying to fill a gap that he felt existed between like a city planning department and a developer's need to make a financial return on a property. And he was hoping to create bridges across this so you didn't have permitting requirements that actually created a loss in value or created projects which didn't work, and so forth. So he wanted to create this kind of linked network of disciplines in real estate. And I was very infused by that. I got our chapter to give the largest donation we'd ever given to an organization at that time. And that's, and that was the start of it. And then latterly, I had done a fair amount of work for the Runstads and for some of the initial sponsors of the program, like Foster Pepper. So then I got invited to be on the board as the thing was kind of getting going. So it was great to see it from sort of the idea to where it's got to today. I mean, that's really great to see. I like to think our funding was very modest compared to what other people have put into it for our organization, but hopefully that was every brick, right, is an important one. So I'm glad to see where it got to. And since then, I've done lots of other things with the university, like the commercial real estate certificate program, and also running a similar program to what's run in Seattle down in Tacoma for a while. So I'm a passionate believer in real estate education for all segments of the industry. Whether you're a planner, I feel a planner should know what a developer's looking at, and I feel a developer should know what a planner's looking at, and architects and appraisers even are a small part in the process. So I think that kind of integration is very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get over to your company, Resolve. Tell us a little bit more about your company and how you got into appraisals.
I got in through nepotism, basically. I emigrated to the United States when I was 21. I was married. I married an American in London, and same registry office as Mick Jagger, as it happens. And I'm glad to say our marriage has lasted a lot longer than Mick's. I don't know which one that was. But anyway, so I emigrated to the United States as a newly married person. That was in 1982. And it was a pretty tough economy at that time. The only job I got was doing a demolition project, working for Jack Raffin's company, and earning $5 an hour. And it turns out my father-in-law was a real estate appraiser. And in a weird sort of twist in the story, I actually, while I was doing this construction job and looking for a job where I didn't have to, frankly, use my brain maybe more than my hands. I went to the University of Washington and was told that with my degree, etc., I should get into real estate because I had a geography degree. And so he directed me to a company which was a direct competitor of my father-in-law's. And I worked for that company for a little bit. Then my father-in-law hired me full-time as an appraiser. So that's how I got in the appraisal profession. And I've been doing that since 1983.
Good. And so your company Resolve, tell us a little bit more about that company.
Well, so when I was first hired at Charette and Riley, my father-in-law was Keith Riley, and when I was first hired, we were doing appraisals for all kinds of developers. Lot of time for financing, also a fair amount of litigation work, then we had the savings and loan crisis, and that's when banks started to get a little more control over the appraisal industry. And up to that time, if you did an appraisal for a developer, it could be submitted to a bank, and it was really based on the integrity of the appraiser and the quality of the report. Well, the savings and loan crisis, some of that was blamed on real estate appraisers being unduly inflated. So the banks took over the industry, and you could not do a financing appraisal without submitting it to actually directly to the financial institution. So our client mix went down from about 450 clients down to about 150. And like a quarter of our business was Seafirst Bank, for instance. And I started to get that feeling, this is sort of 91, 92, that level of client dependency was unhealthy, actually. Everyone's well-intentioned, but obviously if you do an assignment and you have a client that represents a quarter of your business, I just don't think that is a good business model. And gradually over the years, that turned out to be accurate. We had a real recession in the appraisal recession, really in the 92, 93 period, where there wasn't a lot of lending going on, and most of our clients were banks, and they used their ability of controlling a lot of our business to really push fees down. It was very hard to make a living. And I decided around about 93, 94, I didn't want to do any more financing appraisal work. So long story short, when I went through a couple of different companies, all my own. Runstad, Gibbons, and Riley was a successor to Charette and Riley. And then I formed Resolve in the year 2000. And I made the decision not to do any more lending work. Since that time, and I have to say I was prescient given the collapse of the financial collapse, which came about even though appraisers were apparently controlled by banking industry. We still had a massive collapse, which I think showed that the situation was way more complicated than any inflated appraisals, even during the savings and loan crisis. So since that time, I concentrated on things that I felt were more interesting than pure bank financing, and these include like title claims. We do a fair amount of work for that. We have done a lot of litigation type assignments where expert witness work. working both for government agencies and against them for property owners. And then also we do a lot of open space work, farming easements. Our county, King County, has just a wonderful program of buying property rights from farmers and preserving farmland around the community. And that work has been very just great to be involved in that kind of program where we're helping sort of preserve farming and preserve food production and so forth. So that's really what we do today. Most of our work is conservation easement work, open space work. Then we do a little bit of litigation work, which I'm getting a little tired of. And then we do a few title claims, which are always very interesting because they're unusual. Easements across people's backyards, that kind of thing. So very, very intellectually stimulating work and makes life fun. So.
Good. Well, besides intellectually stimulating and challenging, I'm sure you've seen just such a broad spectrum of appraisals you've done over the years. Maybe share some war story or interesting tidbit, a project you worked on. Help us understand some of the things you've seen and done.
Yeah, probably the most exciting thing, and unfortunately I can't talk too much about it because it's still confidential, but I was hired by the FBI to be a part of a potential fraud case, and this is related to the financial crisis that involved a real estate appraiser. And actually, we went out to the community where this had happened. They were deliberate in picking an appraiser that was outside the community, so it prevented any sort of business relationship there, and really followed in the steps of that appraiser and tried to decide if he had taken a fork in the road, which perhaps he shouldn't have done. Turned out that I didn't think he had. I think it was, there was a pretty sort of difficult time in real estate where so much was being paid for a lot of different properties, primarily caused by cheap financing. And so I didn't think he had overstepped the mark, but that was an interesting assignment. Another one that was very interesting was I was hired by both the Department of Justice and a group of the attorneys representing a group of property owners on a rail to trail corridor, the East Lake Sammamish Trail. That was like 85 properties. And so we got these two clients and we're trying to, come up with something that works for both parties in terms of reflecting the various interests and concerns that they have. I really like that assignment. We're being asked to come up with what is fair. The problems are complicated and varied, and there are so many different situations. And that's what I've always liked about real estate is that there is a personality involved with real estate, in the sense that you really can have two side-by-side properties, and the impacts on those properties are very different depending on the situation. And people, I particularly like assignment, which is when it's homes, because for most of us, our home is our largest asset. That's what we get to pass on. Is we might borrow money against it. And I think it's absolutely, and as we saw with the financial collapse, who would have guessed that kind of collapse, calamity would have occurred really on the backs of your typical couple or family in a home, and what devastation that can cause, and how that changed the economy. And so I do think a fundamental aspect of our economy relates to home ownership and and being able to use that asset, pass that asset on to your children. It's a way people create wealth. And so I like talking to people about their homes and how they create value and what they pay for it, what they think it's worth. So, you know, that's a pretty interesting assignment for us. So that's, they've been some fun projects. And then there are obviously lots of litigation type assignments. We've done work on tunnels throughout Seattle. Very unusual, you know, talking to property owners about the impact of a tunnel 30 feet under their house. There's some interesting conversations about what people have and feel, and how they feel it's a pretty big dent on property ownership, and so interesting stuff.
Wow, yeah. So looking at all the things you've worked on, changing a little bit, I want to ask about the future. So what do you see? You know, obviously you've seen some things change. What about fintech, things like financial technology changing with appraisals, how they're asking to be done? What do you see coming up in the future for appraisals?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about appraisals is the change in the tech. You know, I'm going to tell you, you know, the walking home from school with no shoes story in the snow, given my history. So the analogy here for appraisers is that when we wanted to use a sale, go and confirm a sale, find a sale comparison, we would walk down to the King County courthouse, go to the assessor's office, pull the excise tax affidavit, pull the map, take a picture of it, you know, absolutely, totally laborious work. And now you can get on Zillow and or any number of other sources and find out what people have paid for their property. And I think that more information obviously has, I think for more generic types of real estate, has massively created some level of conformity in the market in terms of information that's available now to not just to buyers and sellers alone, but also appraisers. You know, everybody now has a pretty good idea. And so when we go meet with somebody on appraisal, usually we get information from Zillow, you know, that they provide us with inputs from Zillow and all this kind of stuff. And so everybody's much more well-informed. I think that creates for a better market, frankly, more even market. In the commercial side of this, so the future of the industry for residential real estate, I think we're going to see increased automation. Interestingly, though, there are limits, like Washington Mutual, which collapsed, obviously. They felt they could do without appraisers. They instituted, or less appraisers, they instituted sort of an automation lending model based on assessed values. And I think we can see that modeling lacking a human element there is a problem. You know, it's sort of like the equivalent, I suppose, would be stock trading by machines instead of people. You know, I think there is a human element there, and that's important to recognize. So, but nevertheless, I think for residential real estate, we're going to see increased use of automation tools in valuation. Commercial real estate, land, I don't see that changing much. You really have to have a human on site looking at a property. I don't really think you can do it over the internet. There's too much variance. There are too many different things. You know, does the computer model notice that, you know, there's dampness in the basement? You know, those are kind of things I feel like when the appraiser is going to continue to perform a very valuable function and be needed on a very sort of personal level for that kind of property, and particularly for land, walking over land. You know, these are things I think that small variants can make actually a big difference, like where wetlands are and so forth. So I feel like we'll certainly see an increase in the technology tools that we have. We're now using, for instance, I use a drone when I didn't use before for inspections. That both saves time and creates additional work too, actually, because suddenly we're looking at roofs that we could just say we didn't have access to. Well, now we have a drone that has access, and so we can see things. So I don't see too many changes in that arena for appraisals, but except with more information, I think we can be more accurate, we can be faster, and we can be less expensive. So.
Good. No, I mean, I can obviously see that if improved efficiency, but then it only goes so far. Somewhere around here, I've got a check for 1 cent for my WAMU stock. I won't tell you what it had been worth before the great financial crisis, but it's a token, almost insult, but yet I got to keep it somewhere framed for you know, no, it's gone. But all right, so turning the page. When you're not doing appraisals, do you have a favorite book you could share with us, or what you like to read?
You know, probably one of my favorite authors is Eric Lawson. He writes these historical accounts of events. You know, for instance, he did one on the Galveston hurricane, which is a fascinating account of what happened to, I think it was right around 1900. His latest one was a little bit more at home for me because I grew up with grandparents and parents that had been through the war in Britain, the Battle of Britain. And so his latest book is The Splendid and the Vile, which is about Churchill's managing Britain during the Second World War, an event that you know, obviously the world at war like that, hopefully something we'll never see again. And just truly an astonishing account of one man's ability to, what a difference one man can make. And I think a lot of people feel like that battle for that small country with the Nazi Germany on the borders of France would have been very different but for that one man. So I think it's very inspiring to see the contribution that everybody makes. And then within that, everybody makes a contribution. You know, when you go through a book like that, you can see all the parts that add to that jigsaw puzzle. And he couldn't have done it alone, and nobody could have done it without him. So I like that. I see life as a jigsaw puzzle, and I think everybody plays a very important part in it, in creating a picture. So that was a good book that I've read lately.
Great. Well, if people wish to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
The best way is email. It stays in my box until I do something with it. So it's not something that voicemail tends to be a little invisible to me until I kind of travel back through it. And so I would recommend contacting by email, which I'm sure can be provided. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. And yeah, don't hesitate to contact me. When I do any kind of teaching, I'm reminded of a comment that a professor made to me while I was in college, and he says, you know, Anthony, you ask some of the stupidest questions, but they're questions that everybody has, and I appreciate the bravery in asking them, and sometimes they're not so stupid. So that's I'm always encouraging people, hey, speak up, your concerns or things that you're worried about, or just very simple things sometimes no one's ever thought of asking it, or that they're afraid to ask it. But I always say, put it out there. Let's, these are all good. Every explanation kind of may go to a different place too. So.
Good. Well, I like that. And the simple thing, as you said earlier to start off, you talked about building the program brick by brick. In the book that you mentioned, and I see a common theme of what you've given to the university, the program, the appraisal profession. So thank you for the program, and thanks for coming on with us today and sharing a lot of your experiences.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks very much. Yeah.